So Chelsea set to sign Joao Felix from Atletico Madrid on a permanent deal. This is the news we've, I think, been expecting for most of the past week, especially over the last few days. And now David Ornstein, the classic Ornstein dagger, Chelsea agree deal to sign Felix from Atletico Madrid. We're going to look into the deal, kind of what it means for Chelsea, because I feel like obviously it is another one of these deals that isn't solely about Chelsea going in for a player that they really, really want desperately and they've been tracking for a long period of time and like radically improves what we have or kind of really fixes a hole that's in the current squad. It, of course, is very much tied into other transfers, which is still quite bizarre, but that is the reality we find ourselves in the summer of 24. So we'll go into that, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. If you haven't checked out my Man City review where we kind of did a tactical breakdown, that is up on the show right now on the podcast feed. It will be up in the cards on YouTube, so go and check that out if you haven't already. But this is the news. Chelsea agree deal to sign Joao Felix from Atletico Madrid. The agreement has been reached with Atletico Madrid for the player. The 24-year-old has agreed personal terms on a 6-year contract with the option of, and get ready for it, an additional 12 months. So the classic 6+1, 5+1, 7+1 deal continues with this ownership. Chelsea had opened talks with La Liga club last week to sign Felix. And of course, this is all tied into how the Samu Almirodian deal collapsed. And basically, Atletico Madrid needing to find money from somewhere to sign Conor Gallagher. So you have to, of course, tie it into that. But of course, Felix is previous with Chelsea. He was on loan with us in the second half of the 22-23 season, where he scored 4 goals in 20 appearances. He then, of course, was on loan at Barcelona last year, registering 10 goals and 6 assists in 44 games. Of course, he signed for Atletico way back in the summer of 2019 for that massive 126 million fee. He has scored 34 goals for them in 131 matches and been capped by Portugal 41 times. He would become, if this all goes through, Chelsea's 9th summer signing. And of course, said right at the end of the piece, and obviously it's been brought up, Chelsea and Atletico remain in discussions regarding a separate deal for Conor Gallagher, which you would assume is in some ways tied into this deal getting over the line, even though they are not kind of a classic swap deal. I firmly believe once again, it's kind of one of these back scratching exercises we've seen across the course of this summer between Premier League clubs, between Premier League and European clubs. It's kind of the natural state of things at the moment. Now, to be honest, I've been quite taken aback by how optimistic everyone is to see Joao Felix sign for Chelsea. Partly due to his career, partly due to what we actually saw from him when he was in a Chelsea shirt, and also just based on what the current squad needs. I mean, unless Felix is shaped into something that Maresca can use him for that he wasn't used for at Chelsea before, or, you know, he's really fitting into a cog that we don't have. I mean, I personally can't see it. And given what I watched yesterday, I'm not entirely sure what Felix would have done to really transform what Chelsea's problems were. We spoke about that in my Man City review. Chelsea's problems were structural in terms of midfield, in terms of lacking someone off the ball who really presses, who really harries. Felix is not that player. Part of his big problem is his work rate off the ball. And I don't think he's going to provide that for Chelsea. And of course, his end product as well has been regularly questioned too. I mean, I think it says so much that, you know, when you're buying a player, this isn't always the case. Sometimes selling clubs fans will kind of ingest or kind of like disparagingly kind of, you know, talk down the player, and they actually turn out to be a really good player because, of course, they don't want that player to leave. But I feel like, you know, the fact that they're basically celebrating Atletico fans outside their stadium, that they're finally getting rid of Joao Felix, it hasn't been a happy marriage. It hasn't been a suitable career choice for him. I still kind of believe the player should have probably stayed at Benfica when he was still on a high. But I feel like it's gone on long enough now that you can't just argue, well, it's a tactical profile mismatch. I think that I always believe that Felix as a player has not done enough on his own to prove that he is substantially better than maybe his environment. You know, Cole Palmer last season was a prime example of this. He has problems around him, but he still turns out to be Chelsea's best player, an amazing player. I think if you are brilliant, I think you can be limited by your environment, but I also think that over the course of a season, talent should shine through. But this is, of course, the split that Felix wanted, and this is now a chance for him to find a new permanent home, somewhere where he clearly enjoyed his time last at Chelsea, even though it was a short stint and it was during a very bad period for the club. So it's not exactly like he's coming in from off the back of a loan that was amazing. I mean, I think that you see a lot of comps at the moment in terms of, again, there's a lot of nice comps regarding Joao Felix, but in terms of his end product, that has always been my big question. And, you know, am I having him in front of Nkunku or Cole Palmer? No, not really, in kind of central roles. And he's not a winger either. So again, it's like I don't see what deal this service is. You know, I wasn't too disheartened that Samu Amarodian fell through, but Amarodian, you could argue, is, in terms of priority for what the squad currently needs, it's kind of more important. But again, you have to go back to what this deal kind of is, and it's a last minute sort of back scratching move for both clubs, because Chelsea want to sell Conor Gallagher, a player who I think is more suitable to what Chelsea need currently. But again, we've been through this many times, and instead they're going for someone else because Atletico need to get them off the books. It's a little bit like the ongoing Lukaku, potentially Victor Osimhen deal. So that's what kind of makes these deals this summer so weird, because it's no longer, transfers no longer feel simply about, we want this player because we feel like he addresses an issue we have in our squad and he's going to bring this, and this. More it's about dancing around financial regulations. Atletico don't have the money to get through Alvarez, to get through Conor Gallagher, so they need money from somewhere, and Chelsea of course have already committed to selling Conor Gallagher. Gallagher clearly needs that move to go through because he's not training with the first team, and that situation needs to be resolved. So they've got themselves into a very sticky situation. Now, there is no denying the talent of Joao Felix. I think in terms of innate talent, in terms of technique, there were moments when I watched him at Chelsea where he did do things that were quite impressive, where he did look like a player who could reach a higher level. I think my question, a very fair question, is that, you know, that's a part of the game. It's the first part of the game. It's that talent. It's that you can beat a couple players, but it's your decision making when it gets to that final third, which really separates decent players to amazing players. And I always think that Joao Felix has been a player that, not all the time, sometimes he can prove to have that end product, but more times than not, I don't think he's proven to have the end product, especially with the hype that's come with him. I mean, unless he's going to, and he's still young enough to potentially develop into this player and prove a lot of us wrong, and become a bigger player and become an accomplished player. And maybe Chelsea will provide that environment for him, but it's not exactly a great environment for players to walk into at the moment, in my opinion. So, and as well, I think off the ball, I think he's got real limitations. And, you know, I think that there are other players who, again, you know, Carney Chukwuemeka, I was more excited to see him develop this year and to see what he could develop into. And I just look across the squad and I just don't see how he addresses an issue. I think for people saying that they're excited to see him, I think it's more like it's a name that people know, and theoretically maybe he turns into a brilliant signing for us. But this is not a conversation about like clinically what the squad currently needs and lacks, is it? You know, it's not the striker that maybe finishes the chances. It's not maybe a central midfielder who's going to cover ground a lot more. It's neither of those things. It's kind of just more clutter. And the knock-on effect, of course, to Raheem Sterling. We've had all of that blown up over the past 24 hours. We'll see how that develops. Obviously, Carney Chukwuemeka has not been in squads. Noni Madueke, Makala Mudryk. The knock-on effect here, I think, is going to be also fascinating. But, you know, we've got a lot of games this season, so I think Felix will probably, I could see him starting a lot of the Conference League games, to be honest. And to be fair, for the level of teams Chelsea are going to be playing with, I think he'll probably look really good in that competition, as a lot of players will. So maybe that'll be a good chance to showcase it. Listen, whenever a player comes in, we want them to be amazing, because any player we sign, Joao Felix, Renato Vega, Tosin Adarabioyo, Marco Marin, Yuri Yarosik, whoever it is, we want them to be amazing, because if they're amazing and they help us win, happy days. I can't lie to you about my feelings about Joao Felix. I don't think he's an incredible player, but we hope that he proves makes my opinions look silly, makes all of the cynics look silly, and proves to be exactly what Chelsea need. I think that's based on hope. That's based on kind of, again, a name that I've attributed, or a tag I've attributed to this player, theory. It's not based on overwhelming evidence. This guy is the saviour that Chelsea need. So, yeah. I still think there's a couple of weeks to go. I think this kind of deal is like, it is what it is. I think the Osman one's more interesting to me. It's whether Chelsea can get that one over the line, because that really is potentially a needle mover. Like, that's one where you could actually go and see, yeah, I could see how this could really move the needle for Chelsea. Until that's resolved, for me, it's just kind of potentially more clutter. And not to say that Felix, Neto, Felix, Palmer and Kunku, I guess on paper people can put their nice teams out, but whether they actually form a coherent team that actually works, as we saw yesterday against Man City, is of course such a big question. And that's really the big leap when you're wanting to become a team that challenges for the biggest honours. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below, and yeah, I'll see you again very soon. All the best.